Alright guys, in this video I'm going to be reminding you of some of the rounding things that we did this year. So rounding is when we're making numbers easier to work with. And a big clue that you're going to be rounding is if you hear words like about or around, or you see this symbol here. So when we make numbers easier to work with, they're not equal, but they are around or close to. And rounding is a major life skill. I promise you, you are going to use rounding every day for the rest of your life. You're going to do it with money. If you're at the grocery store and something costs $3.14, you're probably going to say, oh, that's about $3. Or if with time, you might say, that took about 20 minutes to do, or you might say it's about 3:30. So major life skill with rounding. All right, so in third grade, we worked on rounding to the nearest 100, to the nearest 10, and then we also did a little bit of backwards rounding. Now, some of you came into third grade using some little rhymes like go next door, if it's 5 or more, 5 or less, whatnot. That is something that is based off of what you're going to see here with what the numbers are actually doing. So I'll remind you of that as we're going. So let's do some nearest 100 practice. And I'm going to show you a couple of different examples that you might work with. So here we have 841 and we want to round it to the nearest 100. Well, we already know that 841 is near 800 because it's in the 800. So of course it's near 800, but maybe it's closer to 900. And this is where the number line comes in handy. All right, well, the only way to know which is it's closer to is to figure out what's right in the middle. That's called that midpoint. So right in the middle of 800 and 900 is 850. This 50 with the 5 in it is actually where that little trick or riddle comes from. When you're looking for that 5, you're actually looking for the number 50. So 841 lives over here on the number line. So we would only have to hop this much to get to 800. So it's closer to 800. It's about 800. Whereas if it would have to hop this far to get to 900. So it's close to 900, but it's closer to 800. So 800 is its nearest 100. All right, let's do another example. So 674 is close to 600 because it's in the 600s. So that's a big clue of what it might be. But maybe it's closer to 700. Well, the only way to know is that midpoint. 50s are in the middle of hundreds. So 600, 650. Well, 674 lives over here. So look how close it is to 700. It would only have to go that far. So even though it's close to 600 because it's in the 600s, it's actually closer to 700. All right, you might see what's coming next. So here we have 250. Well, of course it's close to 200. It's in the 200s. But maybe it's closer to 300. Well, if this was 850, 650, this is 250. Ooh, our number is actually smack dab right in the middle. Well, this is where some mathematicians just came up with a rule. Because if there wasn't a rule, some people would go down and some people would go up. So the rule is, if your number is smack dab in the middle, you round to the greater number. So 250 is about 300. Last example with the hundreds is over here. This one can get a little tricky sometimes. So we know 964 is close to 900. It's in the 900s. This is where it gets tricky. Some people go, there's no 100 left. Counting by hundreds doesn't stop at 900 because 100 more is 1,000. So thousands are actually groups of hundreds also. We've learned that in addition. So 1,000 is actually the next 100. If you were to add 100 more, you'd get to 1,000. My midpoint, just like 850, 650, 250, 950. Well, 964 lives over here, so its closest 100 is actually 1,000. All right, so we've done the nearest 100, which I think is the easier rounding practice. Now let's move to the nearest 10. This is where I see some of the biggest confusion, okay? And I'll tell you why in a moment. So this one will be a simple one, okay? We're looking at the nearest 10. Well, we know that it's close to 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70. So we know it's close to 70, but maybe it's closer to 80. Okay, well, just like 50 is in the middle of all hundreds, 5 is in the middle of all tens. So this is actually 75. All right, well, 71 lives right here. So 71 is about 70. So if you spent $71, you would probably say, I spent about $70. All right, now, this is where things get tricky because sometimes third graders think that when they're counting by tens, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100, then they stop. And they think that's where tens counting ends, but it actually keeps going. It could go 110, 120, 130. So what I see happen a lot is people will say, okay, it's in the 40s, so 40. Okay, and then they put 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. Well, if you think about it, 148 on the number line lives way over here. So, if we use just some thinking for a moment, would 148, which lives way over here, be close to 40 or 50? No. Just because it's 40 here, it's actually 140 and 150. Because again, if you were to count by tens, tens don't stop at 100. It's 110, 120, 130, 140, 150. Okay? And then just like it's 75, it's 145. All right, well, 148 lives over here, so 148 is about 150. All right, let's do another example there. So even though 8 is in the tens place, it's actually 380, 390. 380 is in the middle, or no, 385 is in the middle. So 381 is right here. It's about 380. And last one. 9 is in the tens place, but it's not 90, it's 590. So, this is where third graders, just like that one over there, 90 isn't the last 10, it would be 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100. 100 wouldn't make sense to go here, but it's the next 100. 600 is actually counting by tens. So in the middle would be 595, my marker. And 592 is over here. So it's about 590. All right, so when you are talking about that rounding riddle or look for the 5, well, in the tens, it's actually 5, 5, 5, and 5. But in the hundreds, it's 50, 50, 50, and 50. All right, now let's look over here. This question is actually asking us, there were about 500 t-shirts sold at a carnival, okay? What could the actual number of t-shirts have been? So it's asking us for what was the actual number that would round to 500. Now, if we look at 500, it's a perfect 100, so they probably rounded to the nearest 100. So let's look here. Well, 400 to 500 would be our number line. 450 is in the middle. 438 is about 400, so not that one. Let's look here. The nearest 100 is in the 400 or 500 again. And I could have even used this number line again. Sometimes that happens. 450 is in the middle. 489 lives right there. Ooh, 489 is about 500. And if I kept doing other number lines, I would notice that 550 would round to 600 and 576 would round to 600. So this one is the only option of these that would round to 500. That could have been the actual number of t-shirts. All right, so use number lines. Use your 50s and your 5s to practice your rounding.